So hello, good morning to everybody who's logged in. Thank you for doing so, and thank you for saving or giving up your time to have a quick session with us and what should be quite lively and discursive. My name's Mary Bennell, I'm Director of SWPA, and the title of this is Delivering New Homes, Current Achievements and Future Plans. And we've got all sorts of people here going to be giving some talks. So what I'm going to do is go on to the next slide. This is our running order. I'm going to give a quick session on the SWPA successes and benefits of MMC. And then it's going to be Laura Young from Wiltshire Council. So Laura, do you want to introduce yourself very quickly? Just tell the meeting who you are.
Yeah, morning everybody. So I'm Laura Young, Residential Development Manager at Wiltshire Council.
Thank you. Next is going to be Gareth Flowers from Fisher & Dean, talking about the role of the principal contractors and ground workers. So Gareth, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Yes, thanks, Mary. Good morning, all. So Gareth Flowers, Director at Fisher & Dean. We're involved with the delivery of modular schemes at the moment with Magna, and also discussing schemes with Laura at Wiltshire. We've just completed the first 3 units, so I'll explain a little bit more later.
And then we've got Tony Woods from LHC going to talk about our new homes framework. Tony, do you want to say hello? Or have we lost him? That's a good sign, isn't it? He's disappeared off the face of the earth. I think you need to turn your volume up a bit, Tony.
Oh, can you hear me okay? No. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, okay. I'm Tony Woods, Group Technical Manager at LHC. I'm responsible for our Offsite housing construction frameworks and our traditional framework as well. So good morning, everybody.
Yeah. And then we've got Phil and Lisa who are going to talk about the Housing DPS and CMM Toolkit. Do you want to just say hello quickly, Phil and Lisa?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Phil Blackmore, I'm the Regional Procurement Manager at SWPA.
And I'll be joining Phil to talk about the DPS and the value-added bolt-on, I guess, around the toolkit. So that's been developed by myself and the team at CMM, which is Constructing Modern Methods. I work for them in terms of developing this innovative new compare the market is what it's been coined as for MMC procurement. And I'm the Construction Programme Director.
And last but not least, we've got Kay, who's going to talk about our plans for a new consultancy services framework. Kay, do you want to just say hello?
Hi everyone. I'm Kay Wills, the Technical Support Manager for SWPA.
Thank you everybody. So just a quick roundup from me about where we're at with our various procurement offerings, and then on to some much more interesting stuff from the rest of the panelists here. So at the moment, as South West Procurement Alliance, we have a number of current procurement offerings. We have a housing construction traditional framework, which we've been running since October 2018, runs out in this September. We have an offsite construction of new homes framework, which went from May 2019 to April 2023, and then we have, last but not least, our low carbon offsite housing DPS. Just to give you an idea of the volume of the works going through our various frameworks, it's down the bottom, the value of projects that are in the pipeline, 177 million for the offsite construction new homes and the DPS, and the traditional housing 96 million. What's interesting about frameworks is they always start off a bit slow and then build up. Unless you've had ones that it's just a run on of the other. So one of the things we're doing today is talking about what next in terms of housing construction for us. And one of the decisions that we have taken as the South West Procurement Alliance, and we might want to discuss this a bit more, is that we think that the place of a traditional housing construction framework there is no longer a place. We feel that everybody should be doing some sort of offsite modular within their buildings of various amounts of modular, depending on what client preferences are. But that's certainly the way forward for us. We feel that that's the way to achieve the outputs that are required in terms of energy efficiency and quality. So we will be looking at the new framework that is being currently developed, and Tony will talk a bit more about that, for how we put in a big principal contractor work stream on that one. Just looking at some of the things that are being developed and have been developed or delivered through our new homes framework. Hope Prize, I'm sure lots of you have heard of the Hope Prize scheme, a ZPOD's impact modular scheme in Bristol, done in over a car park. And one of the really interesting things about this is it was done over a car park, and after the scheme there were more parking spaces than there had been before. But certainly that's very interesting, and there's lots of booklets about that, publications and case studies about that. And then the other thing that is being developed, and I think Gareth referred to that, is for Magna housing, some offsite housing. It's all part of a huge program going through, working its way through the system, and these are some of the designs for it. One of the other things, we have been doing a very big project, and Phil and Lisa is one of the key clients, not Lisa, sorry, Laura will know all about this, is the cluster development. We've done a mini call off for Wiltshire and Magna, and bringing together two clients using standardized designs, making it easy for other clients in the future to use it. And I think Laura will talk a bit more about that as we go forward. But we've produced a booklet called As Easy as 1, 2, 3, making the whole process, which can be very painful for clients, easy, simple to follow, with some standardized processes. The other thing that we are really right in the middle of doing, we have done, is we have delivered some move on accommodation for Cornwall Council. A site at Cowlins Mill has been done, and we're looking to work with them on developing more solutions via our DPS going forward. So Cornwall Council very much interested in our DPS and using modular housing to provide move on accommodation for the homeless. And some of the other things that we are doing is around developing the supply chain, and looking at all sorts of different modular suppliers and giving them access to procurement solutions in the public sector. So this is just a range of companies that are applying for our DPS at the moment. We've got BT Passive, that's a site there, Dover Cardiff Council. We've got Settlewood Homes, who have done a lot of work for student accommodation but are now moving into housing. And we've got MMC Modular, who are a wonderful outfit, who are using prisoners on day release to develop their unit, their modules. So really sort of a vast range of very interesting companies coming up through the supply chain for delivering modular in all sorts of different ways. And I think that's rather unique, rather a wonderful thing to see that we can offer them that opportunity. So I said it was going to be about the benefits of MMC, and we all know, trundle out the cost, quality, design. But I just think, from me, as somebody involved in it and in the sort of procurement bit of it, involved in seeing how the delivery is going, I thought just some very quick benefits from me. It's having the design portfolios and working those through are really something that's coming through the whole spectrum. And you talk to other big clients, they're all developing design portfolios, and some of the larger offsite manufacturers have them, that can be used, can be tweaked, can be finessed for various people's planning requirements. The cost transparency and certainty once the design freeze is on, once it's all been ordered and design freeze has happened. Comparable costs with traditional, using the same specs. We've had to do quite a lot of analysis on this, and the costs used to be much higher than traditional, but they are beginning to move definitely in the right direction. Short timescales for on-site delivery. I'm sure Gareth will have some words on that. And the big thing, no more muddy fields and masses of vans rushing around the narrow lanes, which particularly when, developing in the southwest in some of these smaller backland sites is of great interest, obviously, to residents. And also muddy fields is not something that I really want to go back to, have enough mud in my everyday life. So I think that's me done. These are some things that Gareth is going to share with you. I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Laura now to give us the benefit of her words.
Thank you. I'm going to attempt to share my screen now and hope that I pass the first test. Are we seeing that?
Yep.
Yeah. Fab. Okay, so yes, just a quick run through then of what the benefits we perceive to be of demand aggregation, or aggregating demand is pooling the resources, if you've not come across this term before. So just to give you a bit of a background in terms of where Wiltshire Council, where we started, back in 2019, we'd just come to the end of our previous development programme, and it was our sort of opportunity to dip our toe in the water to see whether or not, as a local authority, we wanted to really explore this at great length. We did our first programme, a traditional build, everything went generally very well. But what we decided when we made a decision to move forward with a new 10-year programme was that we didn't want to start out with a product that would need to be retrofitted in 10 years or 5 years or whenever. So what we wanted to do was actually start developing a product that would work for the future. So we did a lot of research around passive house, carbon neutral, carbon zero, and through meeting lots of different people, we were actually introduced to Roll Along by some of our colleagues at the MOD, and visited the factory, and they introduced us to Magna to say, well, Magna actually have house types that we're building for them. If you wanted to effectively purchase the product, we can, you can purchase the product that Magna have designed with us. So we wanted to enhance that specification because the homes were still delivering with gas. We wanted to move to an all-electric solution, and we wanted the homes to be bigger. And we were really welcomed sort of by Magna to say, well, actually tell us what you want, and rather than you building something different from us, let's change our base specification, because actually we want to be delivering zero carbon homes, and we want to be delivering homes that are 100% NDSS. So we worked together to actually change their standard house type and set that as the new baseline with Roll Along. So we procured this through the sort of as a direct award off of the mini competition that Magna had done through this Southwest Procurement Alliance framework. And this was in essence our kind of proof of concept to prove what we have, that this is the right direction for us to go with all of our 10-year programme. So we placed the order on the back of some positive pre-app feedback. The homes have been delivered to sort of 60% of their completion. However, we're still waiting planning permission, which I'm sure any of the clients on the call will probably have some sympathy with at the moment. What we recognised quite quickly was the way in which the process works with the manufacturing industry, and just how different that is from a traditional build. So when you're working with a factory or a manufacturing industry, they have a much more greater pipeline. They've got quite often a production line that they don't want to stop. And if we came along and said, well, actually we want to, could you just build us two-bed houses? This is our specification. Can you please just build this through your run this through your factory? It doesn't really work like that. For starters, you need to have real economies of scale to make that work. It takes a huge amount to actually develop a design into a manufactured design or into an engineered design that works for the factory. So it's changing the mindset quite significantly, but you're doing it once. So you're not having to do that every time you repeat the process or find a new site and go through the procurement process and get a contractor on board. You're actually working with the same person. So that process, it does really require you to think differently about how you plan your program. So rather than working your program through a series of de-risking your sites and going through the design process and going through the planning process and then appointing a contractor, what you're doing this way is saying, actually, we want to book a slot in the factory in September 2022, because that's the next slot that's available. And then you work backwards. So it is really changing the mindset. So you're saying, well, actually, if we need to be in the factory in September 22, then we need to have planning by that date. So we need to make sure we're in for planning by April, knowing how long this is taking at the moment. So actually, everything needs to be working towards those dates. So it does create a slightly different way of thinking about your program. And the way, one of the best ways of really working that program is having this set of standard house types. So we were quite lucky to come into a relationship with Magna, where they had already done a huge amount of work. They had designed their standard house types. They had worked with Roll Along to actually design those standard house types into some manufactured volumetric modularized system. So we didn't have to come in with our own standard house types because we loved what was already there. We wanted to obviously make some changes to the specification, and we were lucky that Magna had a very similar mindset to us. But I think one of the greatest benefits of this is that not only are you able to generate economies of scale by working with the same product, you're actually able to generate repetition through the factory. And one of those, and the main benefit from that is the quality of the product. So if you're building the same house types through the factory and you're able to order in bulk, you generate economies of scale. But if you're actually then able to continue to put the same product through the factory, you're also generating that repetition, which is the benefit of being in a factory, and it increases the quality control aspect. So that's been, another huge benefit that we've identified through this process. I think equally, it also, it really heightens that need, the need for, or the reduction in some of the costs that you incur. So if all of the design work is done to some extent, then you're reducing some of the design costs in your project. But equally, through the process of quality assurance and quality checking, you can start to reduce down some of the needs for a clerk of work. We could still put that process through the factory, but after you've seen the 50th two-bedroom house of the exact same standard to the exact same quality, do you really need to keep going through and checking that? So it's been quite an eye-opening sort of experience to see how differently we can work with a standard house type. And the other benefit to this is that quite often when you go through a traditional build approach, you are not getting the information about the specification until you receive the elusive O&Ms at the end of the process. But actually with this approach, we're seeing the entire specification at the beginning of the process. So you're actually getting the detail of it, what the taps are, what the windows are, what doors are being fitted. Everything is in the specification that you sign off at the beginning of the process. So you get that information up front and you can check that with your maintenance and your asset teams. And you're having much more insight into the process as opposed to a sort of traditional approach. So in terms of the sort of benefits of aggregating the demand, I think what this shows is that actually alone, Wiltshire Council delivering 100 homes a year, we would probably be considered quite insignificant small fish in a factory, in a manufacturing industry. But if you can pool those resources and aggregate that demand with Magna, then we're a little bit more attractive because now we're delivering 300 homes a year rather than 100 homes a year. So that ability to generate economies of scale and to generate some kind of real attractiveness to the manufacturer is we're going to them saying, now we're not just saying we want to put 100 homes through your factory, we're now saying as a cluster, we want to put 300 homes through the factory. Now, if another RP who's also thinking along the same lines as we were 3 years ago, you'll be thinking, actually, I want to start down this route, but I don't know where to start. I don't want to go to a factory and say, we've got 100 homes and we want you to build them for us, because then you might be led by a manufactured design as opposed to a housing design. You equally might not want to go with your own standard house types and have to go through the 2-3 year process of getting that manufacturer to turn those homes into manufactured designs. So seeing the work that's already been done, another RP could come along and say, actually, we want to jump onto that bandwagon. We want to, you know, you've done all the work. Can we just now order off of that cluster of, and can we add to your order? And then another might come along. And then rather than being a cluster of 2, you become a cluster of 4, and you're putting through 450 homes a year or 500 homes a year. And that's when that aggregating demand starts to really reap its benefits, because you're again becoming more attractive. We've just tendered for a 3-year program, and we had two manufacturers tender for that process. Now, that was for 300 homes in quite an immature market. If you, in 3 years' time, when we're tendering again, have 400 or 500 homes a year, you become even more attractive to the market, and you can then generate more of those economies of scale, and you give yourself a greater kind of collective power when you're working with the manufacturers. So I hope that's explained generally what we perceive to be the benefits of aggregating demand, I think. But happy to answer any questions. I think that's covered everything. You're on mute, Mary.
I am unmuting, yes. Thank you so much, Laura. And that was a really, really powerful example, you know, of in practice what you're seeing. And yes, if anybody wants to talk to Laura about how she's done that, please, I'm sure she'll put her contact details in the chat for us. And yeah, she is a very, I think what she says is a big plus for demand aggregation. Right. Next up is Gareth. Gareth, do you want me to put up those pictures for you?
I think you'd be kinder on people looking in than looking at my face, Mary. So that'd be great if you could.
Okay, I'll do that, but I'll go on mute. Right. Okay.
Lovely. Thank you. Yeah. Hello, everybody. So as previously said, Gareth Flowers from Fisher and Dean Construction. As a slight overview of our business, we've been involved with residential delivery for over 30 years, and first got involved with the affordable market way back 30 years ago, predominantly with the Section 106 delivery on our own developments. More recently, we are 100% focused on the affordable market. We've always seen the benefit of challenging the way we construct housing. The industry seemed to be a little bit stuck in its ways. Traditional methods seem to be very slow at change, but we as a business have always embraced new technologies. Some have worked, some haven't, but we feel you've got to push the boundaries to progress. And moreover, as a bricklayer myself for many years, I've realised that the industry is facing quite a challenge coming forward. Not only with skill shortages, but even over my time in the trade, a lot of the old arguments with traditional just don't seem to stack up anymore. It was always a footprint. Monolith, for example, never used to stack up because the footprint of the build with the increased wall thickness made it unviable. Well, cavities have gone from 50 mil to sort of 200 nowadays, and it's opening up the market, we feel, to new innovation. We were involved with Magna on a scheme, and our route into modular was off the back of a traditional scheme, and they were discussing with us about coming up with a package to do the groundwork essentially, and to act as principal contractor. The first scheme was 15 units in Sherborne, and they've got at the moment a package of 7 sites that we're involved with, and there's more coming down the line. Our role as PC is a little bit unusual on this one. Contractually, it's a little bit strange, and we did sort of scratch our heads a little bit in the beginning. We've got no actual link with the modular provider. The modular provider is, as you've no doubt understand has been brought on by Magna, by close collaboration of actually developing the modules over the last few years. We've come in on a slight tangent, but in essence, our role as PC is not greatly different to that with a normal build. We generally get the schemes, they've generally got the planning is already in place. And this is because, as Laura was saying, with modular, you're putting the planning in to allocate the modules. So once we get to a scheme, we engage with the engineers to come up with drainage design, foundation, obviously roads, external works, section 38, any sectional agreements that are required. We also engage with the architects. The architects, predominantly, the requirement there is to sign off all planning conditions to enable us to get moving on site. A little bit of in-house sort of conveyance drawings for the client. Putting together the sort of building control warranty pack, really. We are, as PC, we are actually the registered builder. So even though the modules are delivered via roll-along in our situation, we are registered with NHBC for both building regs and warranty. And then utility coordination, which is what you do normally on site. So that's sort of our prelim works that we're involved with before we get to a site. Once we're on site, we've sort of realised that we split it into almost a 3-stage delivery. So as PC, it's our responsibility to set the site up, to clear the site. I mean, the sites we're on at the moment, we've had demolition, remediation, pretty well everything that you can have on any challenge you've had, we've had on the first couple of sites. Once the site is set up, we take overall responsibility for welfare, health and safety throughout the contract. Ground workers are then obviously brought in. Mary, if you'd like to show the other slides, if that's possible, please. We take the scheme to pretty well damp course. And then if you see the small picture on the right-hand side, that's a scheme of 3 that we've just completed. So that's sort of the stage we present it to roll along. The modular provider actually come along. We offer area release, so they check all our dimensions, tolerances. They are quite a little bit more tighter than traditional build, because there is no scope. Once that module sits down, it's there, and you have no scope to pack it up in a corner. So tolerances are tight, and it's important that we work with the provider to hand over at that stage. We offer attendances during that module install. We provide the scaffold, the forklift driver. As I say, we maintain health and safety responsibilities, and we maintain the welfare facility. The sites we're involved with at the moment are quite small, so there's no partial release back to us to do our stage 3 works. Obviously, on the bigger schemes, you would link across as soon as scaffold is stripped. We would be encouraged then to get back on site and do our final stage groundwork package, which is predominantly hard and soft landscape. To complete the drainage, we've learned a little bit recently on the programming of utilities, and we work closely with Roll Along to work out the most efficient way of providing that, and we've got a pretty good system now. And then ultimately, it's for us to put all the building reg back together, the home user guides, and get CMLs on the units. So again, that's working closely with the provider to ensure that we've got all the documentation. The first few schemes, I think everyone will have been a challenge, as they are with any new concept. But within the first 3 schemes, I think we've provided all variations of a unit that we may encounter, whether it's with steps in the building, staggers in the building, house types. We've been very encouraged the way that NHBC have bought into it, because there's a little bit of crossover between site inspection teams and the accept teams which view the units in the factory. Again, we really saw the wisdom of keeping warranty and building control under the same outfit, because they've got the history in the unit there. There has been talk about whether it's more attractive to go turnkey for your modular provider to be principal contractor. Personally, and obviously from our contractor's point of view, we see the wisdom in a groundwork-led package. We know that the vast majority of issues you get on any site, whether it's traditional build, modular, all the issues are from damp course down. And I think our modular provider have probably realised that it's probably not as straightforward with the groundwork package. To us, we haven't really experienced any issues, nothing that we wouldn't expect on a small site. The initial sites are small, they're tight, they're garage infill sites. And I think that should be applauded. We're squeezing units into pretty sort of scraggy pieces of land with little value. But that again brings its own challenges. And I think the modular provider are understanding the sector a little bit more. And collaboration is key between all parties with this. It is a new concept. It's something that I firmly believe, and we as a business firmly believe, should be embraced. I think that the demand on the industry at the moment, with the skill shortage, we've got to look at new ways. And if this can contribute to the demand, I can see this really taking off. Hence our, we're pleased to engage with anybody and show you around or discuss in more detail our experience, because we think this concept is the future. I think really you'll see on the left there, that's the completed units. They were completed. We handed those over at the end of March. We've got residents moving in there, or Magna got residents moving in on the 9th, which is a week Monday. And yeah, they look great. The journey's been as to be expected with anything new. It's been a learning curve. But I say from our perspective as PC, I think our initial fears of how the contract would work have been sort of dismissed. And I really see this taking off.
Thank you very much, Gareth. I think that was a really powerful testimony yet again from somebody who's actually on the, actually doing it at the moment. And I think the discussion about turnkey or using a manufacturer and then a principal contractor is one that we probably want to have a discussion about that a bit later on. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I think we've got Tony up talking about our proposals for the new framework. But I'm sure you, Gareth, are going to give Tony a lot of food for thought.
Good.
Can you hear me okay now? I've switched over the microphone. Is that better?
Yes.
Good. There we go. At least I've got something right so far. Let me share my screen. You see my screen okay? Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you now a bit about our frameworks, where we come from and where we're going. And hopefully with some of the other speakers, Gareth and Laura, will pick up on some of those points as well during this conversation. So first of all, I just wanted to touch on, if I could change the screen, where we came from. So I put some images up there from 1966. So we're one of the oldest procurement organisations. It was exciting for me to find out. I knew about the World Cup, but I forgot about Star Trek, started in 1966, and believe it or not, Doritos were invented in 1966 as well. So, but the interesting for me, from the first ever meeting when LHC was formed, we were talking about technical standards, bulk buying, and coordination of industrialised building programmes. So you think back to 1966, what were we doing? We were meeting our requirement for delivering over 300,000 houses a year. Local authorities were building, but a large proportion of those houses were industrialised building, which I guess we translate into modern methods of construction now. And it's round about the late 60s, early 70s is the only time that we've ever delivered more than 300,000 houses a year. So perhaps we should look back at the past to see how we did it then, to see if we can deliver it in the future. But it's good from our point of view because we've come back to our roots, and this is what we're trying to deliver now. Just very quickly as well, you know Mary and SWPA, but LHC has got regional organisations around the country, and the reason why I've shown that is because our frameworks encompass right across the UK, and that's particularly interesting for me, being a civil engineer by background and a bit geeky, and normally locked away in a corner, as Mary will tell you, with some pens and a calculator. In that, obviously Scottish and Welsh building regulations are further ahead of us with net zero carbon requirements and things like domestic sprinklers. So it's interesting from my point of view, when we put these frameworks together, we have to look at the regional requirements as well on a technical ability. So our previous framework, we had category 1 and 2 panelized systems. We looked at high rise and we had turnkey solutions. And I'll come on to that a bit more, the comments Gareth has made. Those are some of the things that we've picked up as we've gone along. So regarding the success of the framework, Mary spoke about in the Southwest, but you can see we've got projects all across the country over the last 7 years. Nearly £500 million worth of work has gone through our offsite frameworks. So it's been quite successful. Working with a number of different clients. You can see we've had a lot of work up in Scotland as well. And coming back to Gareth's point about some people still being a bit reticent about engaging with offsite manufacturing, you've got to bear in mind that 85% of the houses built in Scotland are actually timber frame. So we're going through our tender process at the moment. So we've done our review. The middle picture is we're engaging with the market, which is part of what we want to do today, is to get people's feedback. People like Laura and Gareth to tell us what you think, with a view that we'll be launching the next version of our framework in 2023. And that's particularly important when we'll come on to later on, we're looking at the technical requirements, because these frameworks will run 4 years. And I was particularly intrigued what Laura was saying about, you know, your next program will work. So we perhaps need to have a conversation about how we can work with you on that side, because that will fit in with where we are with the framework going forward. So the scope of what we're looking at with this framework, we're looking at residential units, and we're making the distinction between sort of low-rise care homes and high-rise apartments. And one of the key areas we're looking at is the speciality of contractors. I think when we started this in 2014, we had modular manufacturers, one of which was Roll Along, and then we bombard them with absolutely everything to do, you know, which doesn't work. So trying to be intelligent about your procurement process so that you find organisations which are willing to deliver specific types of projects. And Gareth again touched on those smaller sites. Those are always the more difficult ones to engage with. So it's being able to find those contractors and manufacturers, coming back to Laura's point, who can deliver smaller volume of projects. So again, when you look at aggregation of demand, it's you've got different organisations with different capacities and different requirements. So how do we match those up? And I guess that's something that Lisa will come on to a bit later on as well. So we based everything around the Mmc Definitions Framework, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So previous frameworks, we've concentrated on category 1 and category 2. Category 4, I'm not sure about, which is 3D printing. I'm not sure how viable that is, you know, because coming back to Gareth's point, you think about how much structure you'd have to put on site to get a 3D printer to site. So not so relevant. So we're looking at trying to expand it from category 1 and category 2 to bring in components as well, pre-manufactured components. And we'll talk a little bit later about pre-manufactured value as well as being one of the drivers in the market of how we do that. But we're also looking at main contractor services, which hopefully is music to Gareth's ears. So what we're looking at is, with those work streams, category 1 and 2 is manufacturers. You know, in reality, manufacturers are good at manufacturing. And we've learned over the years that not many of them are very good at being main contractors. So it gives them the opportunity to concentrate on what they can do. And the main contractors, as Gareth said, can concentrate on, they know the realities of the world when you get your boots on the ground, what the issues are. And I think that's been some of the problems in the past. Manufacturers are very nervous about doing groundwork, so costs tend to go up higher than they should be. So you need people who understand what they're doing. So we're looking at main contractors, but we're also looking within the new framework, the potential of a groundworkers work stream, which again should be music to Gareth's ears. So we're looking at that so that clients can then look at integrating manufacturers and groundworkers and main contractors together. So the lessons that Mary and the rest of us have learned from working with Magna and this aggregation of demand is actually building that into the framework so that we can deliver the solution that's required. So again, this is all about us doing our review and our learning and saying, how do we do that? And some of the work streams we're looking at having banding of projects again, because we find we have lots of authorities who are looking at particularly those garage sites, smaller sites, and it's making sure we have organisations that are willing and able to engage with those smaller sites as well. You find some of the big suppliers, we all know out in the market, are more interested in large volumes and won't deliver those smaller ones. So it's having that agility to be able to pick up and deliver those sites, but also it's for those organisations to be willing to deliver those sites as well. Then moving on to the Southwest. So here we're thinking about, obviously, social value is one of the key drivers under procurement. So can we encourage more of the local supply chain to be able to provide and deliver in the area? And then the question is, in the Southwest, you've got some quite interesting geography and politics, I guess. Certain people will only go to certain areas. And as a procurement organisation, we tend to find that if you put a tender out, everybody's interested in the K1 area, which is around Bristol and Bath, and not so many people are interested in Cornwall. So again, it's trying to align it with those organisations that are willing to deliver, particularly on the contracting services, because again, we tend to find that contractors are comfortable working within a couple of hours of where they're based from the point of view of management of labourers, but also their supply chain as well. When you start to move out of area, you might have a great relationship with builders merchants, but if you're then working with a builders merchant out the area, you're not known to them. So Gareth can probably relate to this, you know, rather than your stuff turning up at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's put on the wagon and it turns up, if you're lucky, at some point during the day. So again, we've had some feedback already from manufacturers who are quite specific about which areas they're capable of operating in. And this comes back to Gareth's point again. You find that people are, you know, offsite manufacturers a lot of the time are very gung-ho. We can put anything on a lorry and send it anywhere, but beyond the erection side, if you've got to start doing the groundworks and have boots on the ground for a long period of time, then that becomes more difficult. So you've got to be more selective and be more realistic about what you actually are able to deliver and where you're able to deliver that. So we need to make sure we listen to that, and then we've got the organisations who are willing to deliver in those particular areas. So moving on then to the bidder requirements. So we're looking at things like 9,000 and 14,000 being in place for manufacturers, whether they got third-party certifications such as BBA, have they got CE marking or UK CA marking, which will be a requirement from January next year to come in place, but also things like construction logistics. You know, how safe are they moving around the area and delivering into those projects, but also then we've got BOPAS and NHBC, so being able to offer mortgageability on those particular systems that they're providing as well. I think Gareth touched on that. He ends up taking responsibility for the overall warranty on there, but are these various components, do they meet those requirements as well? So that from the point of view of a client, you know that you can get funding on that particular project. Then moving on to the contractors, installers, you know, health and safety becomes important. Considerate contractor scheme. Have they got third-party certifications, like Structural Timber Association in place as well, and the NHBC warranty? You know, clients will require that. I should say it's NHBC or equivalent, but they're the market leader, and it depends on the clients as to which warranty system they want. But those are the type of things we'll be looking at to make sure people can offer what clients require through the frameworks. Now, the scope, it's always a difficult thing. So one of the things we try and do, picture of a radar, you know, most clients know what's approaching them now, but with a framework, because we're going to be launching this in 2023, it's going to be running for 4 years, we need to be looking over the horizon. So what is coming up in the future? I could either use the radar analogy, or I guess a picture of Mystic Meg, trying to sit there with my crystal ball and work out what is likely to be affecting the construction industry and our clients in the future, and how do we future-proof that to make sure over the period of the framework, the suppliers we have on there can deliver what the client's needs are. So some of the things, we've got the Future Home Standard, which should be coming in 2025. And I think Laura touched on this, from the fact that you need to future-proof your housing now. So when you're building them now, you should be at net zero carbon, because we know that the public sector housing are going to be the ones that are going to be pushed to try and get up to A-rated houses, you know, already at C, and that's going to cause problems. We've got Construction Gold Standard, which has come out, and that talks about aggregation of demand, and that's something we're looking at doing. BIM, you know, and that leads into things like the golden thread as well, and how we get there. And in the bottom corner, I've got obviously the case study that we've done with Roll Along and SWPA, and this is about aggregation of demand, and this is something that we want to look at and continue to develop through the framework. And a bit like Laura said, I liken it to sort of what we want to do is work with those clients we've already been delivering through the framework, and the analogy I use is a bit like streams coming down the mountainside and bringing them together into a river and increasing the capacity that we've got there, because that is a difficult thing. It's taken us, as Mary will tell you, it's taken us a long time with Magna and Wiltshire to get there. You've seen the journeys they go on, so it's quite a difficult thing to do, but we really want to bring more people into this framework and be promoting that as an alliance between the supply chain and clients to deliver this aggregation of demand going forward. So I touched on earlier pre-manufactured value. The affordable housing programme has a requirement that 25% of housing should be delivered via MMC, and they've set a target of 55% PMV. So here you can see with the PMV calculator that comes from the CAST consultancy, a traditional build is at 39%. If you use a closed panel timber frame with doors, windows and cladding on, you're only going to get to 52%. So when we're looking at MMC, some of the methods we use currently aren't going to achieve those requirements, particularly if you're looking funding through the affordable housing program. So you're going to have to look at modular solutions will deliver around about 69%. So it's pushing people down that route, but bear in mind that's 25% of the affordable housing program. The other 75% can still be delivered below that threshold. So requirements, some of the things we're looking at, because we don't have the Future Home Standard, how do we define what we net zero carbon will look like? So we're looking at the LETI climate requirements, which are set by London, and they're based around passive house standards as well. So that gives you a guide to how you can meet that. Recently, in the last few weeks, industry has published whole life carbon. So we're looking at that as an issue as well. So we'll get to net zero for operation, but how do we look at whole life carbon? So how much embodied carbon is in that building? That will be the next step that will be coming out for government to hit their target in 2050 of net zero carbon. And we know the construction industry is one of the bigger culprits from the point of view of the amount of carbon that's produced during the construction process. So we're looking at how can we build those requirements into the framework. Life cycle costing as well. So from our point of view, and I think Laura touched on this as well, is how can we look at life cycle costing to take it away from base price into value for these systems that are being used to give a big benefit to the client. Because with the public sector, you are going to own this building for the next 60 years. So you've got all the issues of associated repairs and everything you have to do to that building. So if we can go down the route of fabric first, there's less maintenance needs to be done. Whereas with the private sector, this wonderful thing of eco bling, they can put it on the building, PVs or whatever, because it's not their problem to maintain that. That's going to be the homeowner going forward. And then we've got things like heat pumps and domestic sprinklers. Do we have people who are looking at the framework who can actually deliver these things, which are going to be a requirement as we go through the life of the framework? So we're trying to find those organisations that are able to consider delivering those things now, ready for the client. Again, this thing about looking over the horizon as what's going to be coming up, what are going to be the key issues. As I said before, in Wales, all houses have to have domestic sprinklers. In England at the moment, it will be any building above 11 metres, but there could be a push by some authorities to actually say, well, actually, we'll introduce sprinklers in any type of housing. And in London also, you've got this one at the London Design Guide at the moment. They banned all combustible materials in any external walls down to any level. So they've gone below the 11 metres. So again, we have to juggle those requirements. And then looking at things like heat exchangers in housing, how do we incorporate those in if we're going down to the passive house levels and we're going to be very airtight in the building? How do we achieve that? Who's got the expertise and knowledge to actually deliver those requirements as well? So then to finish off, at the moment, we're looking at 80% quality, 20% price. Interesting to get people's feedback. We've had some feedback from clients already who say, well, they prefer 70-30, but we can look at that in the call-off stages. But we're looking across social value, sustainability, but also we incorporate a factory inspection within our evaluation process. So we're looking at the quality of the products coming down, and we can also look at the sustainability and the manufacturing processes from the organisations to be able to score those as well. So it's been a whirlwind tour of where we've been and where we're going. So I'm sure if you've got any questions at the end, you can let us know. And if you'd like to contact us further, then there's the procurement email address. You can drop us a line and have a conversation, at which point I will stop sharing and hand back to Mary.
Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you for a very thorough exposition of what we've hoped goes in our new framework. So without further ado, because we're moving on with time, as ever, people always like to talk more than I allow them to. I'm going to hand over to Phil and Lisa for their special double act.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
I don't think you can see my screen, can you?
Yes, we can.
Oh, you could you? That's good.
Yes.
What about now?
Yes.
Yep, cool, perfect. Right, as Mary said, I'll give you a kind of very whistle-stop tour of our low carbon offsite DPS. I could talk to you for quite some time about it, but I'll go over the main detail of the DPS, how it works, and kind of where we are now and the next steps. I've just got a couple of slides here which detail what a DPS is, and the kind of benefits from DPS versus the framework. But when the slide packs go out, you know, feel free to have a look at them in your own time and ask me any questions afterwards. So the reason why we decided on a DPS for MMC was mainly down to its flexibility I think, because with MMC, as it's a growing, developing, emerging market, whereas a framework doesn't allow for that flexibility. It means that companies can apply at any time, and as they grow, the DPS grows with them. And also, there's a less onerous application process for suppliers and contractors, and opens the pathway for those smaller regional companies to put themselves in the public sector shop window. So as you can kind of see at the centre of this delivery wrapper, as we call it, is an innovative digital toolkit, and this has been developed with our partners YTKO. I think Lisa will talk to you more about that in a short while. But ultimately, the supplier's application process and the client's call-off process wraps around this innovative digital toolkit, which is at the centre of this DPS. So from the supplier contractor side, they would apply to be on the DPS through our Pro Contract system. It's a very straightforward process, certainly compared to a framework application. And there's a financial evaluation which is based on the financial thresholds you can see above. There's a standard selection questionnaire, and then some case study or case studies depending on the lot that they're applying for. And then they'll go through the CMM process, which again I'm sure Lisa will talk you through, but they'll enter details around the category and type of MMC, whether they offer supply only or full turnkey, performance standards, factory capacity, accreditations, that sort of thing. And then once they're accepted on the DPS, they've gone through that toolkit stage, the clients, our public sector clients, are then ready to call off. And that process is similar in a way in terms of the toolkit, because they'll enter their site requirements into the toolkit. So again, location of the scheme, number of units required, type of MMC required, environmental standards, accreditations, that sort of thing. And then what that will do is initiate a kind of selection process, if you like. So the toolkit will punch out 2, 3, 4 suppliers and contractors who specifically meet those exact requirements that the clients kind of inputted into the system. So it kind of works as a work stream lot filter, if you like. You'll see a lot of frameworks and things with work streams and lots. This toolkit pretty much does that hard work for us. And I think it also will punch out a very kind of brief basic specification document which can be used within the client's call-off.
That's correct.
I won't go through these slides. This is just, again, you can have a look in your own time. It's just to kind of run through the supplier and contractor process, which includes the bits that I've talked about around the DPS application and the CMM process, and then the client's process flow there, which is the call-off process. So benefits for clients. As we know, MMC is a rapidly evolving and changing market, so it allows clients to get to grips with that. It provides crucial data on timescales, performance, site suitability, etc. No obligation to call off. There's the toolkit can be used to develop or update a business case, for example. So clients don't necessarily have to move forward to the call off stage once the toolkit element is done. And we now offer a call off support service. So this is where we at SWPA will can manage and run that call off for you through the DPS. Again, I can do a separate session on that if you need me to, just because of kind of time restraints. But yeah, we're starting to run that service. It's been very successful over the last few months via our frameworks, but we're now doing it through the low carbon DPS. And then just kind of finally with the supplier and contractor benefits. as I've kind of said, the toolkit, there'll be options to provide supply only or full turnkey solutions. Suppliers, contractors will be more in the shop window. As we know, it's with frameworks, is very difficult for smaller companies to be in the public sector eye. This particular product helps assist those smaller companies to be in the shop window. I think I'll just finish off with where we are now. We've got 10 appointed companies, a mixture of turnkey providers and manufacturers. We're in the process of evaluating 4 additional companies, and I'm also speaking to a large number of companies, and we're expecting hopefully a good dozen within the next few weeks. Some really good conversations I'm having with suppliers and contractors. And some of you may be aware that we launched earlier this year on the back of Cornwall Council. They're looking to put a pilot kind of project through of about 30 2- and 3-bedroom home move on accommodation units across 4 to 5 sites, and then hopefully with the success of that project and through the DPS, they're looking to procure 200 more homes across the next 4 years. So that's quite an exciting thing, and we're looking to probably go out to tender through the DPS in about 4 to 6 weeks, all being well. So we're working alongside Cornwall Council to run and facilitate that process for them. I think that's me, Lisa. So I'll hand over to you.
Lovely, thank you so much. Phil has done a really great job there and explaining why we've opted for a DPS with this particular, I guess, set of issues. And it's interesting, really. I know Tony's already mentioned about not being able to meet those same sort of numbers back in 1966. That's always something that I start off with when we say, oh, our targets are 300,000 homes. We've genuinely not done that for such a long time. So it's quite interesting to follow on from that and I guess make my point a little bit further, is that using those traditional methods, it's just not been possible to provide enough homes that we need to tackle the housing crisis, the skills crisis, and all of these quite depressing stats of the industry that we love. And I think teamed with the fact that the traditional procurement rules tend to hamper sort of innovation by precluding those immature technologies and suppliers. And this DPS really does such an amazing job at making sure it supports innovation. It's allowing smaller, newer companies to bring their solutions to the table in a way that perhaps relying on that individual knowledge or experience might otherwise tend towards those more known and familiar options. So you might ask, who are we to be able to add this sort of bolt-on to a DPS? So I kind of need to take you back a little bit, not quite as far as 1966, but a couple of years ago, there was an Innovate UK project that YTKO, which is a company that I work for, led on with a fantastic consortium of partners. And the idea around this was to shine a light really on how we can deliver MMC housing to make sure procurement, legal, planning, economic development, all of these different parts of councils and local authorities can work together. And that was the Enabling Housing Innovation for Inclusive Growth. And there was so much work that was done as a result of that project, which BRE also led proudly on. And there's some amazing reports that we will share with some follow-up. There's lots and lots of resource available for anybody that's interested. Mary showed a couple of photos from the Hope Rise scheme, and that was one of the ones that we're extremely proud about, because it's got a great backstory. So we're offering site visits still to those sites as well through Bristol Housing Festival. So I can share all of that with everybody. I guess my point is I just sort of trying to evidence the rationale behind this toolkit. You could ask, why is it required? Why couldn't just a simple DPS do that? And I know Phil has highlighted a lot of the benefits for both client and the sort of contractor and supplier. But I guess I just wanted to make it very clear the objective of this sort of DPS and the toolkit is to make those full spectrum of products visible and accessible to those decision makers, helping narrow down the number of possible options to a really specific criteria. So that whole process that we go through, it's not difficult. In order to gain the data that has to sit within the DPS, it's quite simply a spreadsheet. It's often been referred to as the compare the market for MMC in the world of MMCs. We've got a number of suppliers that exist on that toolkit already. And the idea is that we can add you into that. Obviously, there is the application process that goes through as part of that DPS. But once you are on there, that's it. That data exists within the toolkit. It can be updated as frequently as your systems and solutions are updated. So we manage that whole process, and we've gone through a very painstaking 18 months to be able to tweak this to make sure that it really does suit local authorities. We worked very for a very long period of time and patiently with Bristol City Council, for example, and piloted a lot of their issues in terms of procuring MMC. So this really has, I guess, the USP for this is that it's been designed with local authorities in mind, so that that sort of risk adverse, quite rightly so, audience of people. What are those first steps to procuring MMC in a confident manner, especially when there are new and immature technologies available? How can you understand what really is there? So there's quite a lot of information around. So I'll try not to bombard you with too much. Hence why I haven't shown you any of the slides. But I'd be really happy. I'll pop in some contact details into the chat and also some links as to where you can find a bit more information about the site visits that we've done in accordance to, I guess, the history of the CMM toolkit. So as to not to confuse you, I work for a company called YTKO. However, the toolkit is designed under CMM, which stands for Constructing Modern Methods. I'm sure you can see what we did there. So by all means, I'll drop some links into the chat for everybody to have a look. And obviously we'll be around for questions shortly. So if that's okay, Mary, I can hand back to you.
Thank you, Lisa and Phil. They always do a good double act together. Last but not least, Kay's going to just talk a bit about, because one of the other things we are re-procuring and consulting on at the moment is just a very little brief outline of our consultancy services, which, as you could say, runs alongside our delivery of traditional and non-traditional construction services. Consultants are some of the key actors within the whole package of consortia. Kay, over to you for your bit.
I haven't used Zoom for a while, so I'm going to try and share, but this could go wrong. So, and I've got a naughty cat and dog playing up as well, so wish me luck. Right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Was that a nod?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Right, okay, so I'm kind of following on from everything that's gone before. So we're obviously talking about MMC and all of that, but just to kind of link into that is one of the frameworks we're currently redoing is our consultancy frameworks. So as it stands at the moment, we've got 3 separate frameworks which cover consultancy services across construction, energy efficiency and fire safety. So as it stands at the moment, that's the 3 that we have. But just to focus a little bit more on the relevance of what we're talking about today, the current H1 work stream, that's what it covers. It's been a great framework. However, there are always improvements that can be made. So with this new framework, we will be looking at, changing the services around rather than having those optional services. They'll all be lumped in a bit more. You'll see in a minute what I'm talking about. And this is the point where the cat's now decided to walk all over my desk, so I'm sorry. In terms of the use of the frameworks, currently we've got 97 leads. This is just a snapshot in time across all the 3 frameworks, which will be amalgamated into one. And current opportunities, so current projects going through at the moment, we're at 37. Going back to H1 in terms of the construction consultancy, you'll see that's the annual spend for 1920, 2021, and then you'll see we had a huge jump in 21-22. So that highlights how important the consultancy framework is to us. And moving on to my next slide, I didn't copy Tony, I must admit, but we do have some of the same pictures. So we've we've taken the same idea there. So with the new framework, there's lots of considerations to take into account, and the objectives, it's very similar to what Tony highlighted for the MMC framework, the NH3 one. So it's about, you know, meeting the gold standard and objectives of the construction playbook. It's about supporting micro and small organisations, early collaboration with clients and suppliers. And as Laura's mentioned and Tony's mentioned, it's about that aggregated demand, bringing all of that together, creation of a digital toolkit, which we've just heard about, delivery of net zero carbon homes to meet the future home standard, fire and life safety, and environmental protection considerations. So, you know, it leads on to why consultancy frameworks are so important, and especially in terms of replacing our current H1 framework. It's a gateway product. Quite a few new clients would potentially test the waters with a framework by using consultancy with us first, but then that does lead on then to, you know, big projects being delivered via our construction framework. So, you know, it's a great thing. But the proposed scope here just shows at this point in time there's 6 work streams being proposed to cover fire, energy, general, which I have broken down. It's quite small, so but it will give you an idea. M&E, safety, and then professional, and the professional one's broken down as well. So that's just at this stage what we're looking at. But as you'll see from the timescales, our PTE session timescale ends today. So if anybody does have any feedback whatsoever, please don't hesitate to drop me a line or drop any comments in the chat, because all the feedback needs to be collated and sent back to the central team. And then the ITT is being issued on the 22nd of June, and the consultancy framework will go live in February. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of the consultancy side of things. And again, as Tony said, questions in the chat, or I think we've got an open session now if anybody wants to, but also feel free to drop me a line and get in touch direct. That's me done. Let me stop sharing. Oops.
That's great, Kay. Thanks very much. And we haven't yet got any questions in the chat, but I suppose I have a few questions that, or issues that I'd love us to go through and talk about together as a panel. I mean, one of the things that I suppose it might be just a yes or no from all of you here. Do we still have to make the case for MMC and Offsite? What are people's views on that one? Who shall I go to? Do we still have to make the case? Lisa, do we still have to make the case?
I definitely would say within the construction company, traditional construction companies that we work with, most definitely. So again, I appreciate that this is more, I would say, it's a 3-pronged approach. You've got local authorities that need to understand or be more confident in the MMC solutions. I don't think that there is a need to understand that MMC can offer those environmental benefits that everybody is aware of, but I think it's about how can we use this in a way that complements our current procurement and internal processes. But also the second arm is the construction supply chain. I think they're the most in need of understanding MMC and its part to play. It's not here to sort of whip away all of the traditional construction sites or work. It's here to complement that and achieve some of the targets that we've set. And I would say the third arm is around that consultancy, construction professional piece. You know, it's understanding all this information that everybody's been working on in different areas. Let's come together and really create a bit of a knowledge sharing platform so that everybody can move along at the same pace.
So Gareth, the case has obviously been made to you, hasn't it? And you sort of see it as a future. What would you advise your fellow contractors who do still follow traditional methodologies? What would you say are the top 3 things you would say to them about?
I think the predominantly the industry is driven by bottom line, and the tier ones, the nationals of everything they're almost like the Ford of the housing industry. They know exactly what it is. It's a system that works. why change? I think some of this has got to be client driven. I hate to say it, Mary, I don't think I've got much defence for some of the industry. It's certainly got to be embraced. You know, we've seen it as a business, and we think there's just too many people stuck in. Even with people like the NHBC, they've taken a while to buy into it and to understand it. And I think when there's such demand at the moment and traditional's working, and I hate to say it, they're making such great money doing what they do, perhaps their hands got to be forced slightly. That's why we as a business, we love the opportunity to get in there. I think people need to see a physical solution as well. It's all very well seeing it in factories. They need to see it on site. And I think as an industry, we're starting to deliver. And that's given the people opportunity to actually come and see what can be done. You know, it's not a frightening concept. It is pretty straightforward. As with all new ideas, there's going to be a learning curve. But I think we're moving in the right direction, just a bit too slowly, really.
Can I just add in on that? Sorry, I know I'm eating into a little bit of time here, but in terms of supporting a workforce that's fit for the future, YTKO are also doing, we're very committed to this. YTKO also, across the west of England, we are looking to support the traditional supply chain with understanding the part that MMC has to play. And in doing that, we're looking to offer sort of training opportunities to traditional trades and to visit those sites that we've mentioned as part of the Enabling Housing Innovation for Inclusive Growth project. We've got a number of site visits that we're calling out to construction trades that are potentially not quite aware of how MMC has a part to play in residential, but just looking around the Bristol and the west of England area, taking these exemplar pilots and practices that have been delivered currently and introducing them to that, the conversations, the network, and then adding in this sort of this training element, if you like, so that you've got a little bit of a specialism or an introduction to MMC. So I definitely think, I completely agree with you, Gareth, there needs to be a lot more of a campaign, I would say, to the industry about how this will work.
So I'm going to pounce on Laura here and say, you know, from the client side, you know, local authorities are always very risk averse. So did you have a struggle making the case for MMC within the council?
Yes, I would say we did, from a number of different routes. Procurement, because it's not a traditional procurement process. It is quite different. The way we approached it was quite different. I think then it's evidencing, at the time we had to evidence the cost benefit. So it's really trying to sell that, because obviously every penny counts when you're using taxpayers' money. So you need to be able to account for all of that. And I think equally, even with our own planning team, we've had comments such as, oh, we don't know that we want prefabs. And it's trying to educate our planning team that this is not, this is just it will look and feel like a traditional house. It just is being manufactured slightly differently. So yeah, I think that there is challenge. And we're having, we're sharing what we know and we're sharing what we're learning, and we're doing that equally with our RP partnership that we've got within Wiltshire, and just sharing the journey that we're on. But we are on this journey at the moment on our own, which is why when you come across, so for Magna to come across Wiltshire Council, and for Wiltshire Council to come across Magna, who both share a very similar sort of mindset and wanting to be on that journey, it's actually just quite refreshing to find somebody else that's prepared to go along that journey with you. And that's where I guess the aggregating demand, it's not just about aggregating demand, it's about sharing your resources and your knowledge and your experience as much as anything else.
It can be a very lonely path, can't it, for a client that's carving the way out. And yeah, I know the collaboration has been real benefit to you there. So I mean, I suppose one of the other things is that I probably want all of us to maybe say something about, what in terms of promoting MMC, what would be your top tip in promoting MMC? What do you think, Tony? I'm going to put you on the spot there.
Well, I think it comes back to what Laura said, and you questioned her about, is this perception of MMC, because as I said earlier in my presentation, 85% of the houses in Scotland are built from timber frame, you know, and it's wetter and windier up there, but some of the concerns is how long is it going to last? And I think the other thing to say is, I've used this analogy before, is tsunami is coming. Gareth touched it on, skill shortage, net zero carbon, which means, as Gareth said, you're going to have walls which are going to be 0.5 metre thick by the time you get all the insulation in them. And at the moment, the public sector is, you know, with tsunami coming, he's standing there looking at the fish flapping on the beach. And what's happening is the big house builders are already moving to the high ground. You know, Barratt's bought Oregon Timber 2 years ago. The other big house builders are securing their supply chain as we speak. You know, Barratt's, if you look at their annual report, they are aiming to have 25% of their housing built using MMC. They've already standardized their house types to deliver MMC. So the big house builders are already shifting in that direction. And as we touched on, skill shortage, but also material costs and everything else, there's going to be a higher demand on the supply chain, because I'm sure Gareth will tell you, you know, he'd love to work with everybody, but he's going to be booked up with work. So, you know, it could be that at some point you go back to him and find, well, actually, sorry, I'm booked up for the next 18 months and I won't be able to do a project with you. So it is about that issue of aggregating your demand, not only for offsite manufacturing, but actually having a long-term commitment to your supply chain, so you can work with people like Gareth and you know he's going to be there for you going forward. So that's one of the key things, is to look at how do you address these requirements. And aggregation of demand is a key way to actually protect your supply chain and make sure they're there for you, because you're committed to them as well, and moving away from this project by project procurement process, you know, which doesn't help. I think that's going to be a problem for anybody, whether it's MMC or traditional. You've got to change the approach, because the market is changing and we're not going to have the resources to deliver. Sorry, there we go. Short answer for me.
There's a Q&A question.
I know, I was just coming on to that. Yes. So the question is, I'm sure, well, I don't know whether it wants to be anonymous or not, but anyway, it's from Christine Brown. And it's a very interesting question. Our volumetric provider is keen to diversify its workforce. What support is available for them to maximise their social value in this respect? And I think probably that's a question we might ask Lisa to answer, because I think she might be able to point us in some right directions on that.
Thank you, Mary. I was just mindful of being rather demanding of everybody's time on the call, so I was going to sit back quietly and wait. So thank you for coming to me. Yes, there's a lot of work that we're doing linking in the social value aspect. As we know, MMC and Offsite definitely do not score as well on the usual social value matrix. So we're working with a number of employers, manufacturers, about how we can help them with that. So the Building Growth Southwest website link I've put in the chat, which is one of my many hats that I use under YTKO. That's the project that we're looking to support the workforce, and the general idea of that project is around making sure that there is a local cooperative model around, if you like. So if you're looking for social value opportunities, I would definitely recommend getting in touch with us. And you can do that through many ways. You can look to support some of our work experience opportunities, some of our piloted training. You can host perhaps some facility visits, and all of these do count towards your social value commitments. So again, this is, I guess selfish, it's a bit of a big ask. We've got a really big job on our hands to solve some of the things that we've talked about here. So if there is anybody that is available to offer any of those things, access or just awareness, really, access to the supply chain, access to your facilities, your sites, we've already got a team of people in place that are working with a number of facilities providers to be able to support their social value commitments. I guess is a very quick answer to that. Click on the link and get in touch, and we can have a separate conversation.
Mary, I'll just follow on just really quickly on that. I think the key to benefiting the most from social value is implementing it through the tender process or through your call-off process. Because I think if you're starting to collaborate and talk to your volumetric provider, at contract stage or during the construction phase, I think it's really not going to benefit, or both parties aren't really going to benefit from it. So my piece of advice would be to use the tender and call-off process to think about that social value. We've started to introduce social value toolkits into our call-offs, as I mentioned, through our call-off support service. So one of the elements to that is a social value toolkit, which I'm more than happy to share with you. And Laura and Paul have both benefited, or they will benefit from it through the call-off process with roll along. So it'd be a good test to see if their committed social value measures come through during the project phase.
I'll just add something in there from the point of view of procurement. It's quite difficult because until you know where the project is and who the client is, it's virtually impossible to do that. So you can look at companies and see how they approach social value from that point of view, because I'm sure Magna and Wiltshire have got different requirements and they operate in different areas, so they want to see the impact in their particular area. But again, coming back to this aggregation of demand, social value, sustainability for people like Gareth, and having a, if he's got a pipeline of work that he's doing, then he can actually invest in people, training, apprenticeships, and all that type of thing, rather than looking at it being an individual, project by project. Again, for offsite manufacturers, inherently they're going to be on site a lot less, so it makes it very difficult for them to do the same sort of social value. And some of the things we've done in other parts of the country, as Mary will tell you, we have the Lintel Trust as part of LHC up in Scotland, so that some of the surplus can actually be used by clients as a grant to go off and do other things. So rather than it being specifically related about the project itself, you can then use some of the surplus that comes back from us to actually do other community benefits, which is difficult for the contractor themselves to do, because they might say, well, we can go out and we'll redo a playground at the school. But one of the things Lintel Trust did was funding for one of the clients, and they went out and they did free school meals during the summer holidays. And then that council actually took that on and funded that going forward. So it's very subjective, and it's got to be a call off, but also looking at that bigger picture. And the things Laura's doing with her aggregation demand gives her the opportunity to be able to work on that with that supply chain and achieve a lot more.
Great, thanks, Tony. We're on 12:30, which is the end of our allotted time. I wonder if Gareth can just do me a very quick 30 seconds. How much are you being asked about your social value offerings when you're doing tendering at the moment?
Yeah, Tony's right. Depending on the client, depends on the requirements we're being asked to provide. It's also right as well. To us, it is longevity of a site. Some of these units were only on there sort of a few months. It's difficult. A continued supply chain is music to our ears as a business, because you can build from that. You can invest in the local environment. We're not turning over big £20 million sort of developments. We're literally doing 2 houses here, 1 house there, and it brings its own challenges.
Yes, yeah. Thanks ever so. And the secret of a good sort of webinar roundtable is you run out of time and allocation. So all I can say is thank you so much to everybody for your preparation, input and discussion. And we will be putting this on YouTube, so you can direct people to it. And thanks very much for all your contributions. And yeah, let's move things forward and go and visit the sites and yeah, go on and into delivering lots of beautiful, I think, offsite homes is what we say, don't we? Ones that look like an ordinary house, but better than an ordinary house, I think is the motive. Yes. So I'm going to sign off now. We're going to stop recording, and yeah, we'll be in touch, and yeah, and we'll send you the link to the YouTube. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.